Welcome back to the Restoring Darkness podcast. On today's show, it's our pleasure to be joined by Dan Weissman. Dan is an award-winning architectural lighting designer, researcher, and craftsman specializing in sustainable design and digital technologies. As an associate principal and director of Lam Labs and Lam Partners, he collaborates on innovative projects and engages with leading academics to advance the field. Dan serves as chair of the IES Daylighting Committee, is an active member of the IES Sustainable Design Committee, and among other things. And we're going to talk to Dan in just a minute. But before we do, we're going to talk about the Soft Lights Foundation, softlights.org. And Mark, I'm going to tell you, we just charted on Apple Charts, number 19 on the design section on Apple. So we got into the top 20. We've done it a couple times. And I think it's because a lot of people are interested in this update you give us on all your work, Mark. So give us a quick update on where Soft Lights is at.
Oh, interesting. Well, yeah. So one of our supporters I spoke with yesterday is in New York. She's in contact with the New York State Department of Public Health. They've told her that if we can get enough people together to submit some reports, they'll open an investigation into the health effects of LED lights. So this would be a big deal for us. So if you're in New York, you're listening to the show, you can go to softlights.org and submit an LED incident report. Tell us about the impacts of LEDs on your life or some specific instance that happened. We're going to submit that to the New York State Department of Public Health and try to convince them to open an investigation.
Always great work every week. Every week. If it's not suing the FDA, he's working with states and governments to move these problems and give people a voice on some of the problems that are happening because of increased light pollution. And I'd like you to go to softlights.org. You can also go to restoringdarkness.com and you can donate to the Lighting and Darkness Foundation, which produces this show. Dan Weissman, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, yeah, horrible wall packs. Why don't you just dive right into one of my favorite topics?
Well, as the article lays out, I had this moment on the top of a rooftop it's a nice happy hour on top of a manufacturer's space in New York City. We're enjoying the beauty of the skyline, and no matter how well articulated some of the facade lighting is in at least some of the buildings in Midtown Manhattan, the things that, if you squint, the things that really jump out at you are all of the sort of unconsidered lighting installations throughout the city. And one wall pack on the top of in a penthouse on top of in a penthouse on top of a building, it was really glaring and completely sort of ruined the experience of the night. And it sort of spurred me to write this article that something I've always noticed, and certainly more recently have become much more sensitized to it. But I think it suggested to me that there's both there's sort of a lot of moving parts with how the lighting industry has been pushing lighting for the outdoor environment, for making money, for selling product at the expense of the nocturnal environment for humans, for non-humans, for sort of anybody who experiences the night sky. And I don't know, I was taken by both the sort of the practical implications here, the fact that it's an issue about visibility and visual experience. There's some philosophical implications here, which I talk about in the article, about how there's the perception that when you put up wall packs that have no method of shielding, and they're just sort of blasting their lumens out into the environment, that they sort of they give you sort of this, the sense of sort of Foucault's panopticon, where it's sort of the inversion in a way.
Sure.
It feels like the property owner is surveilling the night, and then
Yes.
from their perch it
Yes.
creates a privileged position that is trying to ward off nefarious activity
Yes.
or whatever. And the truth of the matter is that 9 times out of 10, I think it's pretty innocuous in terms of motivation, but um, we're at a point where that innocuousness has sort of gone off the rails, and there's we the question is, how do we redirect?
So I don't know if it was ever on the rails, you know,
That's fair.
and there's one box I want to check off right off at the beginning with you. You're a lighting designer. I can't imagine in any of these wall packs being designed by anybody. Like nobody
Absolutely
recommended
not.
putting that there.
No,
Someone just went
absolutely
out
not.
and bought it. Yeah.
Correct.
So we it's not a lighting design issue. Lighting designers wouldn't do that. So we know
Exactly.
that. We know that. So this idea though that you brought up of the prison yard, lighting is often, we lighting up our cities like prison yards. You mentioned the panopticon prison. What is it about this idea that people feel like they should be able to see as far as possible at night around them? How does that connect them to safety? I don't understand
Um,
that.
I don't necessarily either. Well, I think it's a very natural human um, response, and it's something that goes back to the beginnings of human culture and gathering. Let's take this all the way back to the the campfire at night on the savannah, where there are quite literally large beasts out to kill you, and or other raiding parties from other um, tribes or what have you. And so the concept that light provides a sense of safety and security, I think, is intrinsic to the human experience. And as we progressed into urban settlement, there became the need for outdoor illumination for people to feel comfortable moving between internal spaces in the outdoor environment at night. And um, you know, uh, the research on sort of the history of outdoor lighting at night is not terribly uh, thick. There's not a lot of it, but what is there suggests that the development of outdoor lighting came about in a methodal um, uh, in a rigorous manner in cities like London and Paris, due to complaints from uh, probably more wealthy people that they didn't feel comfortable moving around at night, and so that created the development of outdoor lighting standards, the ways in which to fund outdoor lighting, whether it be demanding that each individual put out their own fixtures or it was a city thing. But either way, before electrification, those sources were of limited output. And so there was always the ability to have a source and be able to see it directly because it wasn't too too high of an output. And eventually, a candle becomes a candle encased in glass because of weatherproofing, and that takes on an aesthetic quality that is still with us today in the sort of the sort of quote unquote historical styles that are meant
Lanterns.
to replicate the visual aesthetic of a historic fixture that was once mostly for performative and practical reasons and functional reasons. But with the transition to electrification, we had in across the board the new issue of source brightness,
Okay,
and
before you move on to that, I just want to
yeah,
push back on something you said because it's moving away from where I want to ask you a question.
sure,
Humans also employed the dark for safety as well. So we know that, while fires may have kept away, tigers and lions and wolves, they certainly were a sign of human presence to other human attackers. And
Right.
so we know that humans would put out the fires and hide in the dark. So dark also provides us with a certain amount of safety as well. And I think we don't talk about that enough. And we always assume,
Yeah.
Christ is the light of the world, all the imagery. Yeah, but in the same way, it is just imagery. We also know that sometimes we have to hide, and that fire and light doesn't defend us from everything. And so I think that beginning saying, humans only want light at night, I don't think that's true from the safety perspective either.
No, and I think actually, one of the things that we spend a lot of time trying to dispel when we start working on an outdoor lighting project is dispelling the myth that lighting adds to safety and security. And I think in today's age, as lighting designers, we find ourselves in the position of being darkness designers more than lighting designers, because we're trying to pull back on the quantity of illumination in an outdoor nighttime environment. So I totally agree with you on that perspective. I think physiologically, we can't get away from the fact that we, like most biological species, are drawn towards illumination to a certain degree. And that's something that overcoming requires an act of cognitive dissonance in a way. Like, to your point, like putting out the light because an attacker might come requires a premeditative act and thinking through that and being aware that can be made. But I think just as easily, if the attackers are going towards the light sources because they know that humans are there, right? I think all of those points aside, we find ourselves in a position now where the abundance of illumination has so outweighed the nuances of prehistoric human experience that we're in a fundamentally different epoch, right? We're in the Anthropocene in a way that our ancestors never would have envisioned.
And I think light
Yeah, Dan.
pollution is the thing that's most demonstrative of that, Mark Baker. The thing that we can see, Mark, of all the things we can see of the Anthropocene or whatever you want to call it, light pollution is the number one thing you can see.
Yeah, both of you, your points are valid. So, in the United Kingdom, there was a article just this week. A small town is actually turning off the lights from like midnight till 5 a.m. So we support that. That's great. I wrote them a letter. But in the article, there were people, residents of the town, saying they're now scared. Hey, I
Right.
go out at night or I have to get up early in the morning, and now you're scaring me. I don't know what to do now. So that fear is real to these people. It's still there, and I'm sure it goes back years and years, millennia. So it's built in. So there is that fear. But at the same time, I'm reminded frequently by one of our collaborators that in World War II in the United Kingdom, they turned off all the lights, just like Michael was saying, for that protection, right? So they can't see you, they can't bomb you because you've turned off the lights, and everybody was fine. There wasn't this, everybody actually was doing well. So we can turn off the lights. These wall packs. I'm reminded of little children, like in kindergarten, where if they ask for a light, the child will shine the light directly into the person's eyes. So if they think that by giving you light, shining it into your eyes is helping you see. In fact, as a lighting designer, you probably recognize that lighting it outward onto the surface is actually what you need, reflected off the sidewalk, reflected off the street. So that's how you actually see. So those are
It's the
some, I go ahead.
it's the emissionist theory writ large.
What is that?
The emissionist theory was one of the first theories of light that I don't know if it was Pythagoras or one of the other Greek philosophers developed,
Mm,
that light emanated out of people's eyes.
Hmm.
yes.
And it
And
wasn't
so
until
I,
Alhazen in 10 60 something that sort of disproved that.
Well, I don't know that it was disproved. So when I was taking physics in college, I remember reading a book, and I remember it pretty strongly. It said that was the old ancients thought that it emanated from your eyes,
Right.
and then it was disproved. No, it comes from the sun. And then when quantum mechanics was figured out, Einstein and his friends,
Oh,
then they realized, oh, actually, the ancients were right. There's
well,
this
there's some nuance there.
communication going on. We're connected, and it may not, backwards in time and all kinds of interesting stuff. So
Yeah.
it's hard to say at this point, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So these wall packs, you mentioned that you and your company talk to your clients about that it doesn't provide safety. Can you tell us? Michael and I are very
Well,
interested in this. Can you tell us more about what makes you
Mm,
feel that they're not helpful for
mm,
safety, and do you have scientific evidence on this? And how does that go over with your clients when you say,
mm,
well, lighting doesn't really provide safety?
well, I think so. First of all, there's a lot of nuance, and the science is, um, something I want to tread lightly on for,
yeah, fair
um,
enough.
but that being said, I think there's sort of a couple threads here. One is the question of light levels, quantity of light incident on surfaces as translating to safety and security, right? So there's the quantity of light needed, or I'm going to use needed in quotes, to um, effectively and safely move around in the environment. So let's be more specific. So let's take, a sidewalk. There's a certain amount of light that and I'm going to use the word typical very loosely here. A typical human, um, aged 4 to 85, 90, will need in order to be able to safely walk down that sidewalk without tripping, without falling off the sidewalk, without doing those other things. And we could get into the weeds on what constitutes safety and um, doing that. So there's the physical task of movement without hurting yourself. Then there's the separate issue of feeling secure in your being, that you are able to walk down this sidewalk without fear, without the sense that somebody might come out to get you, or that a car might hit you. Um, and that element is sort of a secondary concern here. Then there's a third concern, which is your adaptation and your eye's ability to see the nocturnal environment and be able to discern appropriate levels of detail to monitor your environment and to understand where you are, and to know that you are not going to run into something, and that you know that you have a sense of you know personal control over your body. um so there's been a lot of assessment. The IES's recent RP43 has done a lot of good work towards trying to create a better, more appropriate thresholds for light level criteria for ground surfaces, vertical illuminance levels for um, the being able to safely move across surfaces. Um, but the, I think there's less scientific publishing on this concern of um, uh, brightness contrast ratio. And actually, don't quote me on that. There might actually be a bunch of this, but I think there's the concern about sort of excessive brightness of sources that wash out the environment and make it give you what we call in lighting design disability glare, right? Where if you're walking down a street and a car drives towards you and you get headlights in your face, you can't see anything else because of the extreme contrast. In the same way, if you're walking or driving in the outdoor environment and you see a wall pack, an unshielded wall pack, more often than not, that blows out your visual perception system so that you can't be attuned to the rest of the environment as easily.
Hmm.
And so the safety issue is multifold with regards to wall packs being, I think, unsafe, and it's obviously context specific, but there are very few contexts that I've seen in my time outside where an unshielded wall pack is contextually appropriate.
Okay, so I've at the LDF we've been doing these. We took on some clients for light trespass mitigation in cases that are before the superior courts of states.
Yeah,
And one of the tools we found very useful was to fly drones above the site at night.
yeah,
And when you do this, I believe that LEDs have caused us to create illuminated nighttime environments that are meant to be viewed from above, not pass through. And I think one of the major issues I see with that is this failure to shield the light source. So I'm not talking about glare shielding. What I'm saying is that when you can actually see the light source on a wall pack, that's it's like a type of pressure on your eyes at night that just
exactly.
blows you out. And in roadway lighting, it's the same. If you can actually see the light source, and we're designing light fixtures, literally, when they're installed, they're designed so that people that are moving through the space will make eye contact with the light source. And I think
Exactly.
this is a massive problem.
Yes. But I want to push back on a couple things just for clarity of language. I would be very careful using the term, just using LEDs as a blanket term the way you guys are using it, because the source technology is not inherently the problem. It is exacerbated the problem from an engineering standpoint and from a cost perspective. But first of all, unshielded wall packs have been a problem since they were invented in the 1950s with high pressure sodium and metal halide.
Mhm.
Um, the LED source is can be designed into an incredibly uh, visually comfortable fixture housing
Mhm.
and optical package just as easily as it can be used in very poorly controlled fixture designs.
So
So
Mark's going to disagree with you on that. He actually believes that LEDs have a certain there's something even in the content of the light which is bad for some people regardless of whether or not you can see a light source. We don't come together on that. I don't agree with Mark on that, but that's okay. But I
but
would
I
but
think
I would let me just finish the
yeah,
point
sorry,
though,
sorry.
that when you're saying that can we design these fixtures this way? Yes, but nobody does.
Well, that's not
Dan.
true. That's not nobody. I think there are many manufacturers that do produce um, reasonably good visual quality light sources. The problem is that they tend to come at a premium, and they tend to be not marketed to the lowest common denominator.
I would
And so the
also say I
problem,
would argue that we don't know how to make them yet. I would take it to another level. I would say yes, there have been improvements made in certain light fixtures, but aside from just the darkness and the glare issues and all that, I don't really think the lighting industry knows how to make a sustainable light fixture that is able to be used and deployed in the right way using LEDs. I don't think we know how to do it yet, Dan. I would say there's been improvements, there's been mitigations, but I would say we need to rethink how we do exterior lighting from the beginning. And I think we've started off on the wrong foot, and we need to rethink entirely how we light the exterior of buildings. And I would say we start that premise with the idea that we don't know how to do it properly yet.
first of all, I'll say that um, my internet has been having some issues, and actually I didn't hear almost all of what you just said.
Oh, that's too bad. I just basically said that we don't know how to do outdoor lighting yet. Like scientifically and
I think you
engineering
are.
perspective, we don't know how to do it.
I think you're making a very large blanket overstatement with that comment, and I don't disagree that many of our outdoor nighttime environments are very poor, um, and by and large, you're you're probably right that more often than not, I go down a street or somewhere outside at night, and it's got elements of poorly articulated lighting. But as a lighting designer who spends a lot of time thinking about this and working on outdoor projects, I take offense to the fact that nobody knows how to do this, because I think we are trying. The problem is that the amount of people that are spending their time trying is pales in comparison to the amount of light fixtures out there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'm going to throw it over to Mark here. But before I do, I would say that um, fully encompassing sustainability, I would say we don't know how to do it. And I would say that's where, we don't agree on that. And that's okay. Mark, over to you.
Well, so Dan, we started off the show talking about wall packs, and now I sort of in my mind we're talking about streetlights, I think.
Yeah,
So maybe that's not exactly what you're involved with. You're not designing streetlights. Cities seem to just buy whatever the cheapest thing is that you can buy. I do know that Cree Lighting posted something a couple of years ago that was very important, and they said that these LED streetlights could be considered dangerous because of the spatial non-uniformity. And they're talking about the LED arrays. So you have a little chip with a spatially non-uniform emission there with the Lambertian shape, and then you have no light, and then you have another little chip, and then no
right,
light, and
right.
then yeah.
Yeah,
And so
and that
it's
and
not
I
sure. Go ahead.
no, I was just going to reinforce. I mean, I think something we've been trying to not use is exactly that type of hardware when we have the ability to, like, whether it's some manufacturers call them like comfort lenses, or use a fixture that has optics that have some sort of indirect capability, so that you're basically diffusing out the source. The problem is that the codes and regulations are so often based on maximizing maximizing uniformity, which is something that's to be questioned as something that's helpful and safe, um, as well as, to your point, the lowest common denominator of cost. You end up with any municipality or any owner trying to maximize the spacing between fixtures, because fixtures are expensive, and maximizing the quote unquote efficiency of that particular fixture, which means um, getting really high angle light pushing as far across as possible, and that creates all of the issues that we're talking about. Even if you have a fixture that's supposedly full cutoff, Thomas Patterson had a great article in LDNA a couple months ago, or maybe a year ago, about how we've been so fixated on this like 90-degree cutoff for dark sky compliant fixtures that we don't think about the fact that, like, the top 20 degrees is the most offending angles for glare, and that, if you have a fixture that's perfectly horizontal, and when it is inevitably not mounted perfectly square, now it's tilted a bit, and now you're shining light up into the upper foliage or trees and in the night sky. Um, Sorry, go on.
That's an interesting point. Let's go on that. So let's say you're putting street lamps on a street in San Francisco and it's hilly. And so are they going to buy a lamp for each elevation as it goes kind of up and down? Or are they going to just buy a batch of street lights, stick them in there, and that's what you get? So is each lamp customized to the angle that it needs to be? I'm asking you because I don't know the answer to this.
I mean, in the Richmond district of San Francisco, I wouldn't put it past them to have a highly tailored technological solution to this. But by and large, obviously, the answer is no. Like they're gonna use the minimum viable product.
Right. So this is going to lead then to this glare issue with the high intensity LEDs. And if you've got just bare diode arrays of LEDs, I'll tell you that, I'm walk around. If I come to an area that has a high pressure sodium from the old days, I think, wow, that's nice. But if I
I got to
walk around
jump in.
today,
I got to jump in because I want to make it clear that I don't think humans have ever known how to do outdoor lighting properly. And I think
We did
even
HPS.
when we did it with fire.
Yes, agreed. When we had fires, yes, we had the
No, but
health
like
effects. We had the health effects of
combustion.
the IR. We had the health effects of the IR light warming us, making us relax, feeling
Oh yeah,
good.
yeah, yes.
No, that's
Hmm.
legit. Saunas
Yeah,
work,
but I
dude.
think one of the
Saunas
big
work.
issues when you're talking about an HPS versus an LED.
HPS was lucky. We got lucky with
Well,
HPS
but
that it
a
was that
couple of
color
things. One
temperature.
is yes. One is one of the big issues that I find is the translation from what we call legacy sources, those HPS or metal halide, to LED doesn't account for equal output of light source. So what happens is you have legacy sources. Maybe you've got old street lights that are 150 watt um, metal halide, and those had a certain output. I don't remember off the top of my head what that would have been, but what has often happened is in the translation to new LED sources, they they find that even when you cut the wattage down by 4 or 5, you're still putting out significantly more light output from the new LED source than the old source. So we're getting this ratchet up effect just by virtue of an unsophisticated specification market basically upgrading with fixtures that are way too bright for their intended purpose.
Mark,
And I think a
well,
lot
hang
of
on.
the issue
Let
is
me just
just
jump on that
physical
because
quant.
let me jump on that
Yeah,
because what you're saying is the specifiers, engineers, and lighting designers are using old metrics for something that Mark believes is completely different. Do I have your argument correct, Mark? Like
yeah,
LED
that's
light is
true.
a completely different kind of light, and the lighting designers and specifiers and engineers are applying these metrics from the age of HPS and the ideas from HPS
no, but it's
to
not a
new
different.
lighting
We're not.
systems.
I don't understand what you mean by a different kind of light. I mean, light is light. I mean, it's
Oh,
visible
it's a
spectrum, and
No,
there's different ways in which it is produced, and there's you can get into issues of flicker and source brightness and all that. But like at the end of the day, if somebody was specifying an appropriately similar optic in LED with an appropriate similar output.
it's not the same thing.
Dan, it's the thing I get talk about is that the LEDs are flat surface. So geometrically, they're generating a Lambertian shape so that the light is non-uniform spatially. So in the middle of the chip, the beam it's a beam, right? So this and the Department of Energy claims from 2005, LEDs are a directional light that emit a beam with
Right.
unique characteristics, right? And so it's these unique characteristics that make it so different. It's the flat surface that's generating the beam. If it was a curved surface, it would be a traditional light source. So this spotlight effect that we're getting from LEDs, that makes it inherently different. Once it
I
leaves
see.
the technology,
I see what you're saying. I see where. Okay, understood. Um, yes, absolutely. And I think what I was trying to get at is like there the issue at present is that we've replaced fixtures that when they have to hold a lamp have to have a certain amount of physical geometry associated with them to a source that can be a wafer thin, and that's what's getting us into trouble. One of the many issues that's getting us into trouble here.
I think that what's getting us into trouble is what you brought up is this lumens per watt, Dan.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
chasing the efficiency at all costs. And this has driven the industry into innovation since the LEDs started coming out in 2010. That's been the driver, is lumens per watt, 5,000K, lumens per watt, 5,000K. And, somewhere around 2017, somebody said, hey, whoa, hang on a second here. And that train just kept rolling, Dan. And now we're trying to, it's left the station, it's gone. And now we got a big problem.
Right. Because and I think one of the, we're at this point now where the inflection point happened and so much got installed. These fixtures aren't dimmable. You can't replace the lamp without replacing the whole fixture.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of, especially early adopters a lot of the early adopters are now coming to the first round of end of life for a lot of their hardware. But, I think a lot of folks are having issues with, buyer's remorse.
Yeah.
If we're lucky.
We're coming up on the 40-minute mark, and I'd love to have you on again, Dan. And but before you go, I want to give you what final thoughts do you have on this topic? Like, where are you at? Just finish it off and take as much time as you need to lay it out there.
Sure. I think the important point from my perspective is that people have an awareness of this, because I think more often than not, a majority of people move through the outdoor environment without really paying much attention or thinking about it, and they might subconsciously be gaining negative experience or having problems with visual acuity, or quite literally having glare problems, and not necessarily having the language or a capacity to understand why it's happening. And so it's sort of incumbent on us that are professionals in the lighting industry to advocate. And so I speak in the end of the article about the ethics of care and the need for us to be sort of doing no harm in our professional lives, and providing the best possible outcomes that we can provide for people. And I think trying to give a voice to that necessity, and to, when a large academic institution has some glare bomb standard fixture that they've been using for 60 years but recently upgraded to LED and didn't pay attention to the wattage or the color temperature issues, that's something that we push back on and try to get those standards changed, and sort of one at a point. But at a certain point, how do we push back against, the prevalence of wallpacks and unregulated light sources, is to try and find, it's ultimately trying to get into the code language ways to try and limit these things so that we can regulate the public sphere.
We got 1 minute. You're gonna have 1 minute for this answer. I'm opening a can of worms right here at the end. We have 1 minute. How important are advanced lighting control systems in municipal street lighting moving forward?
Huge. And frankly, I have the benefit of living in Cambridge, where we were the first municipality in the country to implement a network lighting control system for the citywide lighting. We have a setback where the lights dim down at 10 o'clock, and they continue, and I think some dim even further at midnight. And there's no discernible difference. People don't even notice. And having the ability to have that level of control is absolutely critical. Otherwise, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot.
Dan, your title of your article is called Unpacking the Wall Pack, and I came across it on LinkedIn. I appreciate that you wrote that, and from somebody from your position, it's very influential. So I say keep up the good work with writing those articles, because we need that from within the industry. So thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
And don't forget, folks, you made it to the end here. Go to softlights.org. Thank you for helping us crack the top 20 on the Apple Design Podcast charts. It's always fun to tip up there into the top numbers on this and bring this issue to the forefront. We always have fun. We thank Dan Weissman. His Instagram and LinkedIn and website will be in the show notes if you want to check him out. If you want to check Mark out, go to softlights.org or restoringdarkness.com. Bye for now.